I don't think you're going to find the intellectuals in the pages of the New York Times.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a time where someone of the moral sophistication of Arden, Vey, or Camus was in charge of European foreign policy.
Right.
But this is still a slam dunk, absolutely worthy of making. These people thought they were more serious and more understanding, more learned than anyone else, and they were dazzled is the right word. They had no idea what they were doing. Yeah. They had no idea the tradition they were inheriting. They had no idea what America was, why it was intervening. They completely, absolutely self-deluded about all of those things.
Yeah, they were kind of like young bucks. They were like stupid bros who were like, we'll figure it out. We're great.
Yeah, I mean, they believed a bunch of lies.
You don't need to read any political philosophy. It's fine.
You tear down the house, then you put up the rent. You pocket the cash, and you crush all dissent.
Welcome to the Red Diaper Pail. This is the podcast about art, culture, history, politics, technology, and parenting from a left perspective. My name is Simone.
And I'm Jean-Paul.
And this is episode 13. It's episode 13 on December 14th.
On December 14th.
We're recording on December 14th, first night of Hanukkah.
Yes. Happy Hanukkah.
How was your weekend?
One of the kids puked all over the car today, so tell me. We were quite blessed in this arena because
we don't have pukers.
And boy, is that a pain in the ass.
Yeah. I mean, and you were in the non-family car, so everything was like closer quarters and none of the right equipment.
Yeah, nothing to clean it up with at all. Poor child just sat there stunned.
You fortunate timing though, because you had arrived at your destination.
That's true. That I guess having to drive the rest of the way with the other kids in the car would have not been good. He goes, Daddy, what happened?
Well, I'm really glad I wasn't in that car during that car ride. That stuff stresses me out.
Yeah, but it was just good news. It seems to be just car sickness and not norovirus. So thank God for that.
Back on wood.
Either we'll all be puking tomorrow.
Please don't say that. Should we do a content warning? Some people can't handle this kind of
content warning. This episode contains not very vivid descriptions of puking in the backseat.
We have to remember to switch the laundry when we're done with this episode.
Yes.
Speaking of
good point.
These things.
Yeah. Anyway, yes, having 5 kids is exhausting, it turns out.
Sure. I mean, I feel pretty good this weekend, but
good.
Seeing how exhausted you are has made me feel exhausted and stressed. So, and we're coming into a week that's really busy and is ahead of the holiday, and then at the end of this week they are off for 2 weeks. So, buckle up, take some naps during the day.
Yeah. That's what I'll do with my new unemployed status. Oh, I have to get back to the Social Security bonus. All right. Anyway.
You have the headlines?
I do. First is, there's 2 horrific shootings yesterday.
Yep.
I thought we should mention it, even though there is really no detailed information about motives or even the perpetrators. They're not even releasing information about the perpetrators.
Well, the Australia one definitely targeted a Hanukkah celebration.
Right, but there's no more detail than that. Like, there's a number of different versions of that. I've seen some discourse, which is like, this is what happens when you criticize Israel like this, is you get people like this. There's other people saying that this is what happens when Israel behaves like this, is it makes Jews around the world less safe. I think both things are pretty bad. I think it's just anti-Semites are shitty. They will use whatever excuse that they can. I'm not thrilled that they have like a genocide to use it as an excuse, but I don't think that they require that.
They don't require that
to do what they gotta do.
And the other one was at Brown, and the horrifying thing about that one is that 2 of the students that were impacted by the mass shooting, luckily not harmed, but you know, in classrooms that were being affected,
right,
had been in previous mass shootings, one in Santa Barbara and one at the Parkland massacre. So having learned that, the first thing I Googled was, what are the chances of being in a mass shooting? Because I'm like, this is the calculation. When do I have to explain it to our kids? Just in case it's information they need to have, because the likelihood of it happening is high enough that you need to know it's going to happen. And the answer I got was, according to a 2025 study where they surveyed adults, self-reported 7% of the adults has said that they were involved. They were nearby or involved in or directly impacted by a mass shooting, which is pretty fucking high.
That's really high.
That's a self-report, and people might not be defining mass shooting properly when they're self-reporting. I don't know, but it's very high.
Yeah. There's also like this
too damn high.
There's going to be people who have like 3, 4, 5, 6 these experiences, as we can see. I mean, there's more mass shootings than there are days in the year.
Yeah, that's been true for many years now.
And it seems to be getting worse.
And firearms are the number one cause of death for kids and teens in the United States.
Yeah. I mean,
outside of mass shootings are still much more irregular than other firearm deaths. Yeah. So yeah, horrifying.
There's going to be another conversation about gun control that doesn't go anywhere.
I don't even know if they'll have the conversation. With this administration and Congress, I don't even think we do that dance anymore.
Well, some people will bring it up, and a lot of liberals will start yelling about it. In this conversation about gun control, I think it's notable that it's not like women have the same access to guns as white men do, and men in general do, and they don't seem to be interested in doing this. So I think you really have to answer the question. If you believe that proximity and access to guns is what causes mass shooting, you really have to answer the question of why does that not seem to affect.
Also, this Australian mass shooting is particularly horrific. There were 2 gunmen. There's a lot of people dead and injured. And they went through a really reformed gun control process in Australia. Got many guns gone. They have much more restricted rights, and it happens there too.
They'll say it's the fact that this is the only one that's happened in a really long time.
But the horrors, something about the psychology of it, you'll see it happen in Europe, and they are not using guns. They use fucking knives, but it's the same population of perpetrator for the same hateful, horrifying reasons.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is probably the theme we should be interrogating.
Yeah.
Globally.
Yeah, I agree completely.
So anyways.
Okay, so anyway, that's a
real downer. Sorry, all.
Yeah, that's a pretty horrible headline. 2 of them. All right. So here's the New York Times. Trump signs executive order to neuter state AI laws. The order would create one federal regulatory framework for artificial intelligence. President Trump told reporters in the Oval Office.
Yes. So they are threatening to sue states that have any sort of AI regulations that are beyond the federal regulations, and the federal regulations are extremely liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Basically regulation lists.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a pretty horrifying headline that there's just such explicit permission to these big AI companies to do what they're doing, which is primarily surveillance of data that doesn't belong, usage of data that doesn't belong to them, and collecting surveillance data that either does not belong to them, should not belong to them, and then handing it off to any number of third parties, particularly the government.
Yep.
So it's pretty obvious what this playbook leads you to.
Yeah, they don't want them doing anything about like the environmental impact. It seems that all of these tech guys shifted to Trump, and this is what it was really about, is that they did not want to have any conversation at all about what are you doing, what are the impacts on society going to be, what is the public right to be part of the conversation about what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's been decades of pretty neutered and inept regulation from the FCC and the federal government of the tech companies, with a couple of notable exceptions, one of which is Lena Khan under Biden. But for the most part, like, Google has gotten to do whatever Google's wanted to do since 1999. And I think that all these tech executives understood that it was very important that they get protection from the next administration, both because they were getting some pressure from the Biden administration and because I think the population is much more aware of the risk these guys pose than they were like in 2000, because no one in 2000 was like, oh my gosh, they're collecting all our data, even though they were. So I think that they had a pretty clear calculation, and they want a lot of runway right now. They want, because this is a period of innovation, to really amass as much data as possible and then to figure out what you can do with it, including sell it to ICE. So they need the space.
Someone might call it a period of primary accumulation.
I would call it that. In fact, I have. Go ahead and read the Substack.
No, yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think people have soured on them. They really are more interested in government taking a look at what they're doing.
Yep.
I think that Biden, I don't think he was a champion of this stuff, but he was more tolerant of like technocratic interest and oversight. And I think that they said we're willing to go for full fascism to avoid all of that, because and part of it is not, it's not just like, I think people say, well, it's a disposition towards greed, which it absolutely is. I mean, these people have no conscience at all, and this proves it. But I think beyond that too, it's like the S&P had no growth outside of this. Like, this is what the economy is
right now.
and every time you sort of ask the question, how is capitalism, particularly U.S. capitalism, expected to add growth year after year after year after year on a finite planet when we have ecological catastrophe, a population that's like increasingly unable to do the like skilled labor jobs, all this stuff, all these problems? And the answer is always, we're going to innovate our way out of it. And there really is not going to be an innovation that gets us out of it. But they have decided that AI is the golden calf, and that is the only solution they have to all of these problems. There's going to be a confrontation that happens eventually, when everyone realizes that this is not the solution to everyone's problems. But they need to delay that reckoning as long as possible.
Yeah. And one of the ways to delay, to like prop up the economy and delay that reckoning, is you steal and accumulate in a mass. And you can also push this baloney about innovation basically creating value, which is not what's happening. But I also think with the AI technology in particular, I'm not like an AI hype person at all. And I don't think it has as much technological impact on the world as some people do. I believe it will have a lot of economic and social impact because of how destabilizing it will be. But I do think that the period from like 2022 to probably 2027 or 2028 is a critical period for the growth and innovation within the technology, whether that's like building all the data centers, manufacturing all the chips, grabbing more and more data to figure out how fast and efficiently you can crunch it in order to sell products, which are basically advertising products or surveillance products to people. They need that space right now.
Yep.
Like they're right in the middle of it. And I don't think these big companies actually have figured out how to proceed, and they know they need the space. And I think, honestly, that the government knows that they want that level of surveillance at their fingertips.
They do. You know, it also means that this is just one of the many ways that these people are going to get everything that they want to ask for. The next thing will be when their companies collapse, the Trump administration will print billions of dollars and hand it directly to them.
Well,
and you know that because they've done that before. And that's why you got such bad inflation over the last 10 years, is because the amount of printing they did during the COVID.
Yeah. And I don't think, like you said, the economy can't shoulder the collapse of these companies. They're too big. OpenAI and Google and Microsoft, these are massive companies. They're all in on AI, and the amount of venture capital that is behind all of these startups that have absolutely no product. It's, an enormous part. NVIDIA, this chip market, like, even if it wasn't a bailout just to bail out their rich buddies, I think that there would have to be the Federal Reserve would have to take steps when this bubble bursts. I think.
Well, I think
we're talking about depression level market collapse.
The thing is,
and then China's gonna
swoop in. There is a depression level economic problem.
Yes.
Because there is nothing new in the economy besides fake valuations of fake companies.
Yes.
Companies that, by the way, don't employ that many people at all. They're not structurally.
Usually it's two. Usually it's like a founder and a co-founder.
Yeah.
And they have nothing except for millions of dollars.
Yeah. For these chip factories, these server farms, they don't employ very many people at all. The startups are all bullshit, and a lot of the evaluation is there. But like the whole too big to fail thing is like, it's supposed to be they've employed too many people, or they're holding so much debt, they're like structurally embedded in the economy. If this goes out of business and all these other businesses go out of business, this is just a self-contained bubble that has no structural
machine. Yeah.
Right. The problem is that our economy is a bunch of people pretending that these fake bubble valuations is real money, and all that real money is where all the purchasing is coming from, because there's no actual. I mean, we're now at Great Recession levels of layoff. So all the actual like spending in the economy is based upon this imagined wealth that doesn't exist. So they should wipe them out. They should say, you're wiped out. Too bad. You bet on this. It was a disaster. There's a bazillion experts that could tell you that, and you didn't listen to any of them. You don't get to make trillions of dollars in revenue if you're right, and then still make that money if you're wrong, because the public comes in and bails you out. But they're going to do it anyway.
I also think that, I agree they should let them fail. I think, though, because it's you have these massive companies that basically pivoted their entire
they leverage the
focus
futures,
to AI. You're talking about you're talking about Meta, you're talking about Google, you're talking about Microsoft. I don't know how much long-term damage it actually does to them, and what happens. Are those companies able to actually take that on the chin and not at least have some impact on the rest of their workforce or their manufacturing? I also think it's geopolitically a risk to let the whole thing blow up and for it to do damage to those technology companies, because I think you will have China come in and push that advantage really fast.
Yeah. No, definitely the geopolitics. And this executive order talks specifically about global AI dominance.
Well, right. They certainly want to
pretend that this is going to give them a military or otherwise strategic advantage.
Well, and maybe from that perspective, the executive order makes sense.
Yeah. But the other thing though is these companies, none of their fundamental products are affected by this. Facebook is still going to be a social media platform. Google is still going to be a search bar with a suite of, Google, Gmail, and etc.
Their fundamental product is taking your data and selling it to advertisers. Right. And the only way to do that on hyperspeed is to use AI and large language models. They've been telling their investors that their primary products are data collecting and advertising vehicles. Mm-hmm. And if you look at their general ledgers, their primary products that drive business and drive money is that they take data and they sell advertising.
You always have to have some new thing, because bursting the bubble in AI does not remove their ability to generate revenue with the stuff that they've been doing all along. The problem is the system does not allow you to just say, I will have a good revenue stream forever. No one's interested in that. They have to be interested in growth. So they have to tell a story about the future, regardless of whether that story is real or not. And the only things they've had for a while is dumb shit. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, next. Here's The Guardian. FBI under Kash Patel has become, quote, internally paralyzed by fear, unquote, new report reveals. Leaked assessments based on confidential accounts from 24 FBI sources describes organization as a, quote, rudderless ship.
What are you scared of?
That he's, quote, in on over his head and, quote, chronically underperforming. This one, I think this is something of a revolt. The first revolt against one of Trump's appointments for the department itself, I think, is going to be Patel.
Well, yeah, he is a real loser, and he's in charge of real people with real ideas about how very important they are, trying to do some pretty high stakes work.
Yeah, I don't know who's a bigger loser, him or they have a alcoholic pundit in charge of the military.
Yes,
so
fair.
That one's pretty bad too.
Oh, I think that one's gonna go down soon too. But this guy.
But he's a real loser. The funniest part about this is that they leaked to embarrass him. That when he landed in Arizona after Charlie Kirk was killed, he refused to leave the plane until someone brought him an FBI raid jacket. All the agents who are trying desperately to figure out who did this and to hunt him down in the field office had to stop and search the office for a raid jacket in men's medium. Could not find one, so that they brought him a women's jacket. But this is an important detail. If you're the FBI leaker, you have to make sure that everyone knows
he had to wear a women's jacket
because he's little.
Yeah.
And then it didn't have the patches on the arms because the agent was a rookie agent or whatever. So he still refused to leave until they got the patches.
So they had to go around gathering the patches. Were they using a seam ripper off of other people's jackets to gather all the correct patches?
Yeah. I don't know.
Does anyone have the red patch? We need the red patch over.
He strikes me as a real loser, incompetent.
Real loser.
I guess he screams and yells at people all the time, and then he leaves the room, and the senior agents are like, "You should not have been talked to like that."
Oh no!
And I support this. I think that the FBI should be abused. It should be run by an absolute incompetent, crazy creep. I think they should feel bad every day they go to work.
In fairness, I don't know. The FBI does, I think, mostly horrible things, but they are technically responsible for keeping political assassinations and shit from happening, right? Is there real work that we want to that matters for it to happen? And is he actively keeping them from doing it? I get the sense that maybe he is.
Definitely this headline, internally paralyzed by fear.
Of him? Oh, of being fired?
Of being fired, of being, set up as a fall guy for something. I mean, you can catch charges. You can, you could become a national news story. It's a lot worse than just you lost your job. If you work for the FBI, you can just quit. If nothing's keeping you there.
To our listeners working for the FBI,
which I think is most of them.
I just am going to give you a little advice. You can rage quit. You don't even have to give 2 weeks notice. I think you just turn in your badge and firearm at your local office.
But they're trying to create a sense that the FBI is not able to function. So what I'm saying is that this is not a horrible headline.
Yeah, I mean, the FBI, man.
Anyway, good job, Kash Patel. Continue to destroy the FBI.
I can clap on the microphone.
Yeah, that's obnoxious.
No
one likes that.
Kudos to Kash Patel. And you keep making them bring you the right badges for your arm.
Yeah.
You don't walk off that plane. Don't walk off that plane without the right badges. He's got a
bunch of criticism too for flying around on the public dime to do private things.
Like what? Is he going to Epstein's Island?
He went to his girlfriend is a unknown country music singer, so he took it to a performance of hers.
This is very similar to a plotline in The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. Kyle Richards has been having a secret love affair with a relatively unknown, as far as I could tell, country music singer. And everyone's like, why won't she talk about it on camera? And she was using the Bravo plane to go see her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In that case, though, it's an appropriate use of the plane.
I think there should be a Bravo spinoff with these guys.
I would love to watch Kash Patel walk. I mean, how interesting would it be to watch a day in the life of
Kash and Pete and Pam and Christy?
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, yeah, that'd be watch him walk around. Where is my this? Where is my that? Yell at somebody about something that he knows nothing about, or go to the next room.
It's like OG Housewives. Now it's the Housewives have cleaned up their acts because, woke culture, but we could get right back.
They have a brand to protect.
We could get right back to the good old days if we just feature those guys.
Yeah, they really should. I think. Unfortunately,
I don't think they would let Bravo near the White House because on the account of the LGBTQ.
Oh my god! Unfortunately, I think
like a News Nation reality TV show.
Oh my god! Or what the Daily Wire's production.
I don't think liberal Hollywood will take them.
Yeah,
we live in a divided nation.
Yeah, it's true. Unfortunately, I think Kash is going to be the first to go, and not Hegseth.
You'd rather they have a competent military leader in there.
I think Kash is
hilarious,
dopey in a hilarious kind of way. I think Hegseth is a creep, and he bothers me. I think he's a very nasty man. Well, I'd like to see him.
They should leak the videos of Kash screaming at his office staff, and you might change your mind.
Yeah. Yeah, please. Okay, sorry. If you work at the FBI, before you quit, please just record him doing that on your phone, please. I have to see it. Okay.
Director Patel, just like the rest of the federal government, there have been significant personnel changes at the FBI since President Trump took office. I want to better understand the scope of the turnover and the changes occurring at the FBI. Since January 2025, how many FBI employees have retired, resigned, been fired, or otherwise separated from employment? I need a number.
We'll get you a number.
What is the number? You don't have it?
Not off the top of my head, and I want to get you the right number.
Would it surprise you to know that it's probably in the thousands, like 5,000?
I don't think that number's accurate.
You don't know. Next question. How many special agents or analysts have left or been fired from the FBI since January 20th, 2025?
Say, we will get you the numbers, and anyone that retires is of their own volition, and anyone that is terminated at the FBI, as I've said before, is done so because they have failed to meet the standards and uphold their loyalty and oath to the Constitution.
Yeah, so you say.
Last but not least, the U.S. Boarded and confiscated a Venezuelan tanker that was believed to be transporting oil, which I think means that
they took an oil tanker.
Yeah, which means that the U.S. government is now the Somalians are all pirates.
Yep.
That's fucking piracy.
What'd they do with it? Did they sail it up to the
I think they took it
to Florida.
I think they took it. So
that's an escalation.
This is the new reality. The big eats the small. We can do whatever we want. We have the power to, the right to, because power is the only justification we need. We want the oil, so we took it. And you're a bad guy, and we don't like you. So it's not like they were. I guess these idiots think these stupid liberals were restraining themselves. They were running the world with one hand.
And they were allowing all the oil tankers just sail on by and never taking them.
Yeah, like why would they do something so stupid? You can't run a world by not being, the tough guy. And of course, there's going to be consequences to this because all of these countries have played ball with the United States because there was some reason to do that.
Yeah.
And if you take away any reason to cooperate, they're all going to rebel. And what's really going to happen is we have to be hearing about this soon, is like a pan-South American defense treaty.
Yeah.
Right?
Really.
Like that's the only way to survive in the
with
world. Like
the weapons coming from Russia and China. But don't you know, JP, that the reason that everyone needs to kowtow to America is just because we're exceptional.
Mm-hmm.
We are exceptional. We're pure of heart.
Yeah.
We have an awesome military.
We believe in freedom.
We have freedom. We at one point had manufacturing jobs and we pretend we still have them.
Mm-hmm.
And these ideas will just make you bend the knee.
Yeah. Americans can accomplish whatever they set their mind to, including stealing oil tankers. And I think that's a normal thing.
There's an oil tanker. Let's go get them. The stupid liberals. They just missed them. They were sleeping on the job. They could have gotten any of these oil tankers.
Jesus Christ.
All right, that's a horrible headline.
Yep. And you have the artifact this time, I believe.
It's an essay in Harper's magazine called Liberal Totalitarianism by Pankaj Mishra. He's written a couple books, including The World After Gaza, Life After Gaza, The World After Gaza.
What do you think was interesting about it?
He seems to know his philosophy.
He seems to know his philosophy.
He name drops a lot of philosophers.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, it's time to brush off the old BA in philosophy. That's good.
It's mostly a quiz for you.
Does he talk about Aristotle at all?
No,
fuck.
He is the ones that are all post World War II. Well, not really. Freud's in here. Is Freud a philosopher?
He's more a philosopher than he's a psychologist.
I put that out there for you. Pick it up and.
I don't do it. Good.
All right. Well, let's get into philosophy 201. The West, as we know it, Ursula von der Leyen. Did I say any of the philosophers' names?
Categorical imperative.
Oh, she's just the president of the European Commission. She's not a philosopher.
No, I would.
Okay, the West as we know it, Ursula von der Leyen claimed earlier this year, no longer exists. It is not necessary to explore what's president of the European Commission. It means it is not necessary to explore what the president of the European Commission means by the West to realize that we have witnessed the extraordinary collapse of a once potent idea. It was forged during the Cold War.
By the way, that is good news. Good.
It was yes, and this guy might agree with you. It was forged during the Cold War, largely by American politicians and commentators, insisting on its foundations in democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. Not only had the United States helped install anti-fascist and anti-Stalinist constitutions in Germany, Italy, and Japan, the story went, its intellectual industrial complex has also produced a sanguine account of the world in which the moral arc of the universe, looming high over the aberrations of communist and Nazi totalitarianism, led toward an American-style free society.
At the time, they believed this only really counted for like majority white countries in the West. That was the same thing as it being true.
Yes.
Yep.
In this moral history, Auschwitz and the Soviet Gulag, but not, remarkably, Hiroshima, summed up the extremes of modern evil, which were to be preempted by the education of citizens and the horrors inflicted by the radical left and the radical right, as well as through international institutions charged with upholding the pledge, never again.
Yeah, not to mention Japanese internment, Operation Paperclip.
Or any colonialization.
Yeah.
So I'm familiar with this idea around civic education, historical history education being the thing that will free us from these atrocities.
Yeah.
And so I think I just found it interesting that the example he cites is like education of citizens was one of the first. That is so top of mind in his summing up of how he's responded to this, because it's top of mind for me, but it would never occur to me it's top of mind for others. It's true. I think that the civics education is a very useful propagandistic mechanism to impart ideas about how you want the world, the country, and the world order to be.
Sure. I mean, it's like, obviously you want people to learn about history and what happened and learn about their personal responsibility. That seems to make sense. You want to educate people as much as possible with figuring that increasing their education increases their agency. There's two observations about this I have. One is people over the age of 45, obviously speaking in general terms, like it can never happen again means never for anyone, didn't really permeate. Growing up in a world, I think, where Israel felt very necessary and reasonable and rational, which most people below that didn't. But that education, which you assume that they got about the Holocaust more than younger people, didn't permeate. And the other observation I have is that younger people, by and large, detested this. The education worked in the sense that they understood what they were seeing and were outraged by it, and not passively outraged, in many cases actively outraged, but it didn't fucking matter.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably notable that if your education about the horrors of humanity focused on Auschwitz and the Soviet Gulag and fail to discuss Hiroshima or colonialism, then you're going to have an education that instructs you that protecting the West and upholding democratic values is for white people. It's doing that for white people.
Yeah.
So I think it's very notable that the construction of the West and the construction of these ideas of rule-based world order and international law, these are constructed ideas that are constructed by powerful imperial projects. And it's not a surprise at all that that type of education would actually impact how people understand human rights.
Yeah, I guess it's also true. That's also the case too, that you sort of like that if you believe that communism and Nazism produces these things, the antidote is liberal democracy, makes it impossible for these things to happen.
Yeah.
So if it's happening, it can't be what it looks like.
Right.
But I return to the point, which is that young people, by and large, knew exactly what they were watching. What they lacked, I use the word agency, and that's what the people lacked, is they had no method of acting their politics in a way that could affect reality.
Which is probably why young people don't give liberal democracy a whole lot of credibility.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, there's a ton of cynicism, but like even outside of liberal democracy, they don't have agency. Besides refusing to vote for Kamala Harris, seemed to be the only way in which anti-genocide young people had any effect on reality at all.
I don't know. I think that might discount what people were doing, which at least was like shutting down campuses and stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm not against all of that, but you have to at some point say, were we effective at reaching our goals? And the answer is no.
No one was effective at stopping this genocide. The plunge of civilization into the abyss of blood and darkness, Henry James wrote, as Europeans enthusiastically marched off to mutual slaughter in 1914, is a thing that so gives away the whole long age during which we have supposed the world to be, with whatever abatement gradually bettering. As Sigmund Freud reflected in 1916, a fratricidal war applauded by so many distinguished Europeans had, quote, shattered our pride at the accomplishments of our civilization, our respect for so many thinkers and artists, our hopes of finally overcoming the differences among people and races, and showed us the fragility of much that we had considered stable. Now, I thought this was interesting because, I think both those quotes from James and Freud capture something that I certainly feel in this moment, which is that there's just been a complete, like, earth-shattering destruction of people are not okay post-genocide, or we're still on the genocide. But like ideas about hope and maybe fate in some institutions, maybe hopefulness or future positive vibes about humans, have been robbed from people because of this genocide. And I agree. The parallel to World War I was not one I ever thought about, but thinking of it now, World War I's impact on like culture and art was extreme because it was so brutal and there was so much. The devastation was so worldwide and so complete, and it was unlike anything people were prepared to see. It like had a lot of impact on art and culture and poetry and writing. Basically, you can't take a lit crit class without being like, was it pre or post World War I? Because it just like uprooted this generation and put everyone on a different path about what it means to be like a globalized world where that level of warfare can occur. And I wonder if we're in a similar moment.
Yeah, we are. And like, this is why the civics education didn't matter, is because World War One happened because of the dictates of capital. It happened because you cannot be a first-rate world capitalist power or even a second-rate one and not have an empire. And Germany found itself way behind as a colonial power and needed to do something about it.
Right.
So all of the, it's hard to say what people believe. I mean, this is a time where people still believed in, like, there's legit monarchists running around. The ruler of Germany was a Kaiser. So it's sort of like, I don't know what people believe in terms of liberalism at that point, but certainly whatever ideas they had about the West were used to justify capitalism, and then were subordinated to the needs of capitalism. Sure. The same thing happened in World War II. It's exactly the same thing. It's, World War II, the crisis, a very similar one to the one we're in now, crisis of overproduction, required a war, and a war was the result over the every other like value and ethical commitment that people had used to justify the West, including like not slaughtering people in ovens, for example.
And the genocide of the Palestinians.
Same thing.
Also due to the dictates of capital.
Yeah. So then this is because the United States would obviously rather have an empire with a veneer of respectability and moral outlook. And they found themselves in a situation where they could not rein in Israel because they need it too much to maintain their strategic advantage in the Middle East over China. And the crisis in the United States is growing, and China is knocking on the door. And so they become more and more desperate, and therefore the things that they are nice to have start to go away. That's what liberalism is sort of the nice to have.
Yeah. So they'd rather it stay nice, but it couldn't stay nice.
It could not stay nice in that case.
What this essay, this will describe some of that.
Yeah.
Yet again, a spectacular display of deliberate cruelty and organized hatred has damaged our very sense of self and possibility, been sustained at least in part by a faith that societies would become less bigoted over time. Now, many ideas, individuals, and institutions that seem to advance moral progress have lost their halos. This is another example of like when liberalism starts to fail. Mm-hmm. These institutions, you expect things from them. They can't act in that way. They can't uphold the sort of supposed values or ideas they have because they're not actually acting in those values. They're acting in capitalist interest.
Yeah, even if they want to, and they don't seem to want to.
That, I mean, you see it across universities and NGOs, and I think a lot of young people who are already cynical are like, it's everybody. No one's acting with their values in mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's like people had this commentary about like Israeli propaganda, which is like, I know you don't believe this, you're just dunking on me now. The big one that the liberals won't admit is this charge that being horrified by what's happening in Gaza is anti-Semitic, because no one who's being accused of that believes it. But the other part of that is they don't believe any of the accusers believe that either. They saw George Bush do this horrific thing by invading Iraq. They saw Obama get to the White House twice and said the world is going to arc. We don't like Obama and everything about it, but the world is arcing the way it's supposed to because he's against the war in Iraq and he's winding down the war in Afghanistan, kind of, and he's pulling out of Iraq, kind of. And he's not in favor of these kinds of things. But everyone in a post-Gaza world, everyone knows that he and Harris and all of these people will absolutely fund Israel to do this and absolutely lie to you about why it needs to happen.
And not just like mainstream politicians. You'll see socially progressive, supposedly social justice oriented nonprofits and NGOs go that way. You'll see universities that at 2, 3, 5 years ago would have been very in favor of hosting debates about this or having professors who are anti-Zionist the platform. You'll see them get censored or removed. And so young people are not just looking at like mainstream politicians who are obviously going to go that way because of lobbyists and what the nation requires, but they see, nonprofits or activists or academics that they might actually look up to, that they might actually say, I thought you had my values. And the reality is that the people involved probably do, but the institutions and the way that they operate can't operate unless they fall in line with Israel and the United States government.
Which is to say an exercise in power and not an exercise in moral ethics.
So obviously if a progressive organization can't actually operate unless they count out of this, then you're not going to get much progressive outcome from them. And so it's useful that the facade has fallen. But I think that's really devastating for people.
Yeah. And it means there's nothing. I mean, if genocide is not too far,
Right.
nothing is too far.
And it's watching children die live on TikTok is not enough evidence, then what is enough evidence? It will be hard to read Simon Schama again without recalling that this well-regarded explicator of Jewish history once reposted a theory on X about Palestinians conspiring to take over the world, even as they were being massacred daily. Nor can the lessons of a history of eternal persecution and victimhood seem as clear as before, now that the state built as a bulwark against genocidal anti-Semitism has itself perpetuated a genocide with the help of anti-Semitic Christian nationalists in the United States. This is an interesting sentence, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with this. I definitely agree that the state of Israel and their policies and politics and their existence as an ethno-nationalist Zionist state does not make Jewish people safer. I 100% believe that.
Yeah. This is a riff on the same point, which is learning about the horrors of genocide and being ethically committed to denouncing all forms of genocide or genocidal regimes has absolutely no effect on reality. If the dictates are capital R, we need a genocide. It's the same thing. It's like it's not clear that these lessons are valuable if the state that was created in response to this would then go on to do the same thing to, by the way, the cheering of the people who live there. One of the lessons learned by a lot of Zionists was that this is what nation building looks like. And also, if you don't do it to them, they're going to do it to you. I think a lot of Jewish Zionists believe that. Like, that is, in my opinion, the only moral justification for any of this. Underneath all the hypocrisy is, look, I know it's horrible, but horror is the reality of Western civilization, of all civilization, and we would rather be the perpetrators than the victims. And so would they. So
I do think that it's like there's this sort of like this is what it looks like to build a state. This is what it looks like to protect your people. Why are we hand-wringing now when all other peoples and all other nation states did this before? And there's a sort of that I think that's a true argument that people make.
Yeah, we have just as much of a right to do this, and then in 100 years hand-wring about how terrible it was, and not do anything.
And I do think that's a particularly that argument is particularly situated in these ideas about the West.
Yes,
that are now falling apart.
Right, because the West, if you want to build a quote-unquote successful modern state, that's the model that you're supposed to believe that you know.
Yeah, and Israel has ended up, several decades behind, if you will. The Holocaust was planned and fomented in secrecy by a despotic regime. Israeli, should I say coolness?
No, you have to read it.
Israeli sang-froid amid the first televised and AI-assisted mass extermination and the remote cheerleading of that extermination by, among others, a Democratic senator in shorts and a hoodie, indicates... Is that...
Fetterman. No, Fetterman. Better take a shot.
Indicates more stupefyingly the potency, pervasiveness, and banality of modern evil, encouraged by a reframing of Holocaust memory that justifies murderous ethno-nationalism instead of warning against it.
Mm-hmm.
Many other certainties that defined individual and collective identity in the post-war rules-based international order have begun to corrode too. This includes even the discourse of human rights that was righteously invoked against communism and then against Muslim countries, enshrined by numerous American reports and wielded to justify economic sanctions. That discourse now seems to have always been highly selective, defining human rights as civic and political rather than economic and social. Those who weaponized human rights to coerce anti-American regimes abroad seem nonetheless to have ignored the widening abyss between rich and poor at home, along with the absence of basic entitlements to Social Security and health care, and the manipulation of the democratic process by corporate money.
Wait, are these things now obvious because of Gaza? I thought they were always obvious. I mean, even people who say this stuff didn't really believe it. They just thought that it was better for them if it was.
This is always obvious. Obviously, the human rights framework. Well, I think there are liberals who do believe, I think, that the human rights framework that came out of World War II, for instance, was meant to be evenly applied to all humans. But it's just like that's never been the case. And obviously the governments of like the United States and others were not applying it that way.
Right. I mean, so this is the way I thought it worked for liberals, which is that in an ideal world, one day that we're reaching towards, this will be true for everyone. We don't live in that world now. and therefore we can only partially realize these things, and that you and I both unspokenly know why we can't hold Saudi Arabia accountable, because that would be bad for our pocketbooks in America.
But there are people like Samantha Power who I don't have great admiration for, but who have built their entire careers and I think are true believers in rules-based world order, Western ideas of democracy and secularism, and how this will continue to advance a better and better human rights framework. That, yeah, will there be times where you make compromises, but it is marching in the right direction, and that you actually have commitment from liberal Western democracies to march it in the right direction. I look at that and I see what mass exterminations she cared about, which ones she ignored, and which sanctions she was part of applying to people, and which ones she wasn't. And I think, I call bullshit. But I do think there is a significant group of people who are at least academics and diplomats and policy wonks that think there is this arcing liberalism, and obviously those people can't think it anymore. Even those people can't think it anymore, and not like say it out loud and not be mocked. It's like it's so broken.
Hillary Clinton was willing to say it. I mean,
she gets mocked an awful lot at this point.
Yeah,
she was getting mocked by like mainstream comedians. I mean, maybe it's because she's a woman, but it's so absurd now. I think for everybody to be like, oh, you think that's just we're going in the right direction. I mean, you have Donald Trump in charge of the United States.
But is that a concerning flip?
Nazis and fascists in charge of. I don't think any Nazis are in charge of any European countries. Although the guy in Hungary might be. You have fascists in charge of.
They have a lot of like crypto or like.
So I guess
Nazi
are they these people thinking these are blips? I guess they could be thinking they're blips.
It's hard to say. I would like to know. I mean, that's one thing I think I want to impress upon people is that like whether these technocrats and like talking heads believe this stuff or not is kind of immaterial. They were risen up by people who had an agenda and knew it was bullshit. And whether they were willing patsies or just naive. I mean, in some ways, it's better to have someone who's a true believer function to carry out your lie, because they're more believable when they say the stuff is not true. But
I think that's a good point.
But what they think now is a good question. Like,
where do you go from here? If you work with like the International Criminal Court, or you work in like international diplomacy, or if you're somebody who works in international in militaries and are trying to like deal with the rules of war, where are you going from here?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Lenin has this quote about the elections in America with Teddy Roosevelt, where he's talking about how that Teddy Roosevelt was running for a third party. So the Republicans and the Democrats, he says, were fixated on the past. And the only one who's looking at how the future and how to sort the future was Roosevelt. And of course, in Lenin's estimation, he was looking at the future is how do you preserve capitalism even though it's falling apart. Mm-hmm. And that seems to very much to me describe the situation with the Republicans and the Democrats and MAGA now. Is the Democrats are fixated on the past to a point of insanity, like baffling. How could you possibly think we can go back?
Yeah.
An irrational.
You know who's not fixated on the past?
Who?
The techno oligarchs.
Right. And that's MAGA is obsessed with the future, correctly, to be eye on the future, eye on the fact that we're in a crisis which was produced by the past and which cannot be solved by the past. I also think that all of their solutions not only are evil, which the Democrats would also have evil solutions, but also don't make sense and won't work is the other problem. But you can see why there's so much more like vitality in MAGA versus Democrats, because it's a dead in the water and everyone knows it. And you have to, at some point, you sort of shake down. Like, Schumer, you must know this is dead in the water. Jeffries, you must know this is dead in the water. What are you talking about? Buttigieg, you must know this is dead in the water. This is a dead end. Like, it's over. You have to come up with something else.
Well, maybe this guy will offer something.
Okay, well.
After the exposure of Hitler's and Stalin's crimes, many Western thinkers concluded that an altogether new kind of thinking was required to grasp the radical novelty. I don't know what you're saying. The Enlightenment faith in reason, science, and free speech, already weakened by the First World War, had been devastated by an unprecedented bureaucracy of mass debt, sustained by technology, systematic deceit, widespread gullibility, and eager acquiescence. That sound familiar? Albert Camus was among those driven to understand the culpability of a period which, in a space of 50 years, uproots, enslaves, or kills 70 million human beings. Which, if that's what Camus was trying to understand, you can understand why he was having some crises. He wondered why human judgment, unaffected by unabashed crimes in the past, when the tyrant razed cities for his own greater glory, had become crippled in the face of the much more severe atrocities of the 20th century. Was it because many perpetrators were quasi-philosophers who claimed that they were bringing about their own exalted visions of the good life and a just society and then used them to defend their crimes? Equipped with perfectly rational explanations for mass murder, these modern ideologues were, Camus wrote, the first to put slave camps under the flag of freedom and to commit massacres justified by philanthropy, which I think is a fascinating quote and a really good point. Why did World War I and World War II shake us when there was mass murder by bad guys over just the Joe Schmoes of the world for centuries? And then, but what something about this was like really fucking up the human condition. Hannah Arendt was similarly alert to the unparalleled perversions of language and logic that accompanied the mass production of corpses in the mid-20th century. Systematically tracing the origins of totalitarianism, she examined how an ideology of endless aggrandizement emerged in the 19th century Europe and seduced its best minds, whom she called the tragic and quixotic fools of imperialism.
So one thing is, I think totalitarianism as a concept is pretty fucking useless.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how he's going to apply it to liberalism in this, but I don't think it's a very useful concept. I don't think it understands history and how history is made and how societies run very well.
Yeah, it's not a Marxist concept.
No, it's not. It was a concept developed later on to justify lumping what was obviously polar opposites, which was communism and Nazism, into a single.
Which is fine, because that means it was a concept developed a lot for the rise of Western liberalism. Hannah Arendt, who's written a lot of things that throw on totalitarianism, and it really does go out of its way to try to follow Hitler together.
That was the point. But there was a lot of little wars that impacted lots of soldiers, and there wasn't a total war, like national total war, where every single person was implicated. That happened all the time. There were like giant worldwide conflict, like during the 30 Years' War, which was in the early 1600s. That was like these giant armies sitting in the middle of the land, destroying everything, killing lots of like what you call normal people. And I think partially we don't understand like the horror of this and how it probably was in many ways just as devastating as World War I was, because you read about it in terms of like the kings and the generals and the queens and you don't read about the peasants, so you don't think of them as real people. They're sort of ancillary. But in some ways, like before you have mass literacy and the rise of like political forms outside of like monarchy, which really does consider most people to be part of the land, which is owned by the nobility, they're really, there's a difference in consciousness there, and like what you expect out of life and how long you take to live. And
one of the reasons World War I's impact on culture was so great is that there was enlightenment, there was mass literacy in certain countries, there was a lot more education, there's a lot more emphasis in art and culture, and then mass slaughter happened.
Right. Yeah.
And so it feels like this giant setback.
Yeah.
For humanity.
Yeah, and in some ways, like the development of the people who were in charge of who administrated that war could not consider the people they were sending to die as humans to the degree that those people had come to expect themselves to be treated, because of the development, like the French Revolution and development of democracy and liberalism and stuff. Like those things had caused those people to say, I'm not cannon fodder.
Yeah.
And the people sending them to die, and they knew they were sent, wave after wave of, I'm going to recruit every young man in this town, and almost all of them will be dead by the end of the month.
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter to me at all, because my job is the glory of the nation, and these are the raw materials for me to pursue that without thinking of them as people in the way that they had come to expect to be treated.
Yeah, and there's definitely a parallel to the impact of watching a genocide on social media happen and not have people feel like they have no way of affecting it. because I think it's hitting people in a way that's like, I have come to know myself. I have come to understand my role in humanity, my role in society, my ideas as having some amount of either that I can have agency or that I'm surrounded by people and institutions that would agree with me that this is wrong. And it's so clearly that is not the case when the actual calculus happens. So what is this disconnect? Of course, the victims of imperialism in Asia, Africa, and Latin America had long since possessed an underdog's intuition of how powerful white men obscured their worst excesses by presenting themselves as philanthropists in the vanguard of humanity's march towards a glorious future. Now, was it lost on them that even the most self-consciously liberal and cosmopolitan of modern Western writers and philosophers affirmed racial hierarchies? John Stuart Mill flatly declared barbarian peoples, such as Indians, unfit for self-rule. Charles Dickens, who was famously solicitous to poor whites, especially children, demanded the extermination of the Indian race after a violent uprising in 1857. Understandably, many of these barbarians were reluctant to believe that Western liberal democracies were by definition antagonistic to totalitarianism. That was smart of them. Gandhi claims that democracy in the West, having been captured by special interests aimed primarily to give moral cover to the extreme violence necessitated by capitalism, he predicted in 1938 that even the nominal democracies of the West were very likely to become, frankly, totalitarian.
Mm-hmm.
He was right. Gandhi nailed it.
Yeah.
For George Padmore, the Trinidad-born anti-colonial activist, democratic, quote, scare quote, democratic imperialism.
Yeah, by the way, every time he uses barbarian or race, he's also using square quotes. So,
scare quote, democratic imperialism and scare quote, fascist imperialism are, quote, merely interchanging ideologies corresponding to the economic and political conditions of capitalism.
Absolutely true.
George Padmore, not into your reading list, because he nailed it.
Absolutely correct, yes. The statement is, quote, democratic imperialism and, quote, fascist imperialism are, quote, merely interchanging ideologies corresponding to the economic and political conditions of capitalism.
So where are we now? Are we in the fascist imperialism? Obama was the Democrat.
You have quantity into quality.
Yeah.
I think, so, but by that I mean that you continue to ramp up fascistic policies and eventually you break through into fascism. Like,
it's a dialectic.
It's a dialectic, yeah. In the same way that I'm losing hair, and I'm not yet bald, but one day I will be.
It's way good one day. We like it's bald.
Yes, one day you'll be like, oh, it's enough quantity of lost hair that you're now have the quality of being bald. Yeah.
That's how scientific breakthroughs happen too.
Yeah, the theory of scientific revolutions. Yeah,
are you familiar?
I am familiar with that. That's one of the only two books I've ever read.
That and George Pambo.
I haven't read them though. I'm not claiming to have read them. I would say it's a little bit more than interchanging ideologies, but I would understand why he's probably says a lot more than this.
Yes.
But these types of what I would call liberal imperialism and fascist imperialism are girded by ideologies which are not really that different. It's mostly the extent of the expression of the ideology. The ideology is mostly the same.
Correct.
What is different is like the form it takes and how much is reliant on trickery and how much it's reliant on like direct violent confrontation.
And Gandhi would say that whether it's trickery or direct violence, all of it is just a form to give cover or justify or make acceptable the violence necessitated by capital.
Actually, now that I think about it, speaking about Gandhi, like the subaltern experience of this is it's all violence all the time. Yeah. Yep. So what is the difference to me, an Indian, who they're beating and shooting and blowing up and hanging, whether in the home country they're saying, oh, no, we believe that all people are equal.
That's why the contributions of the third world in activism and theory through all of this have always, I mean, this is not new information.
Yeah.
This has been the case. And people have been organizing about it and writing about it since World War II in the third world.
Yeah.
And it's like several billion canaries in the coal mine.
Right.
We could have been paying attention.
Right. And this is something that people, I'd hit this point home every time it comes up, but if they're willing to do this to Palestinians in front of your face, and tell you they're not doing it while they're doing it, and tell you that it's justified in ways that you know it's not justified, because that is what is required of the system, then as soon as the system requires that to happen to you, they're going to do the same thing to you. Like, they're not interested in the arguments. They're not interested in the evidence. They don't give a shit. And all this stuff comes back home. And it is right now. All the training that they have been getting from Israel on how to perfect an apartheid state in a modern society, they're now using the United States, and which is going to keep getting worse.
Similar analyses, whether from Simone Day or Amy César, ought to have discouraged a relaxed conscience among the victors of the Second World War and opened up broader inquiry into the barbarism inherent in political and economic modernity. The, quote, poison of Hitlerism, quote, had not disappeared, Camus argued in New York in 1946. We all carry it in our very hearts. The year before, he had described Hiroshima as, quote, our technical civilization reaching its greatest level of savagery. But the intellectual self-questioning and anguished artistic experimentation that began in the early 20th century after the annihilation of Europe's old verities did not find fertile ground in the United States either before the war or after. Growing richer and more powerful as destructive wars and despotic regimes ravaged Europe, the U.S. produced no figures comparable to Camus, Arendt, Vey, and now he's listing a bunch of people I can't pronounce because I'm an American. Europeans forced by their traumas to examine a hitherto unchallenged confidence in Western prescriptions of democracy, science, and free trade.
I would say that.
True.
Well, I guess it depends on what he means. I mean, it's Huey Newton is, I think, a titan of America.
It's certainly true that Americans' experience post-World War II was different than European experience of post-World War II. It's a given.
Yeah. Oh, and also, what is he doing here? Is he saying that
pivot to nation? Yeah.
Well, he's saying that these experiences and civics lessons and traumas did lead them to have a self-reflection, which led to social democracy in Europe.
What the usefulness of that argument? Let's see. Unburdened by self-doubt, American nation builders in Germany and Japan, like other Cold Warriors, found it easy after 1945 to establish the West. So I guess they're saying the West is America's idea, and there were no academics
to be you should be highly suspicious of this.
But even if there were academics in America who are highly suspicious of it, who I bet you there were. It's not like the nation builders were like, oh my gosh.
Parenti? I mean, Parenti wasn't that an intellectual suspicious of this?
Right. So, okay. America built the West is the point of this argument.
Noam Chomsky?
I think maybe they're...
Is he American? Does he get to count? I mean, what is he?
Well, he's on the Epstein list, so you can't...
Well, I mean...
Totalitarianism, crudely defined, joined the ideological arsenal of the New West, a way to identify the perceived enemies of its interests, whether Mao or Osama bin Laden, and to furnish both the globally ascendant United States and the diminished European empires with a flattering self-image and a lofty mission. Speaking of those diminished European empires.
Yeah, so I'm going to be doing a piece on this at some point soon, and we should have an episode on it. But they just published a new national security strategy, what the United States did, which is extremely interesting, and has giving speeches about it. And essentially it boils down to they're replacing the old system of utopian idealism as it applies to foreign policy, which is gone as being the world police, gone as being the arbiters of the world order and the nation builders. And in is hard-nosed realism, which is what is good for America is what we're going to do, and everything else is we're going to drop. But one of the things that they say in the national security strategy is it's highly critical of Europe for not sitting on its 2 feet security-wise and not paying more and being more independent. And it also criticizes them for not being more embracing of far-right parties. The quote they're using is they want to support efforts that, quote, restore Europe's civilizational self-confidence in Western identity, unquote. So
they must know the Western identity is under attack.
Yeah.
Many closer observers of the American scene were not deceived. Around mid-century, examining American films, novels, magazines, and comics in California, the Trinidadian historian C.L.R. James cautioned against, quote, the forces making for totalitarianism in modern American life. On a visit to the United States a decade later, Italo Calvino confirmed that here we are in a totalitarian structure of a medieval kind based on the fact that no alternative exists, nor even an awareness of the possibility of an alternative. The idea of an alternative became even more implausible after the U.S.'s apparent victory in the Cold War, whereupon history itself seemed to end in American-style democracy and capitalism.
At least if you're white.
Right. Writers and thinkers in America's privileged classes resurrected, to some profit, the political messianism that their European counterparts had abandoned. When the Cold War ended, it was almost imperative for American and Americanizing intellectuals ensconced in Ivy League universities and the think tanks of the Beltway in Manhattan to hail the United States as the universal nemesis of murderous totalitarianism. Thus, could Samantha Power berate American governments for their failure to intervene in genocides everywhere? After al-Qaeda and then Saddam Hussein abruptly emerged as incarnations of a new totalitarianism, Michael Ignatieff and Neil Ferguson, among many others, impatiently urged the United States to assume its imperial obligations and impose democracy, human rights, and free trade through war.
Yeah, I had otherwise a pretty reasonable history teacher in high school. His like dirty secret opinion that he shared with me was like, we have the power to go knock all these people off. Why don't we do it?
I had one of those too. Well, actually, I did not think he was reasonable. And I was such a pain in the ass. Post 9/11. But it was, I mean, I had my 20th century history teacher was teaching.
This was pre 9/11.
Oh.
This guy was just
Really?
like, yeah, like, well, he's like, look, there's a horrible guy there. We have a big bomb. Like, fucking kill the horrible guy.
Yeah, that
like, I don't, and he was like,
what is that, great man theory?
well, I mean, I guess so. I mean, his thing was like, he was progressive and he thought, the United States could use some work. But like, when there's an obvious, like, strong man killing his own people, like, the United States should be involved every single time.
Well, that was an idea that a lot of people, I think, had.
Yeah, and in fairness, like, you and I are both also outraged that a genocide is happening in Sudan, and no one with the military to stop it is doing a fucking thing about it. But the problem is that if they were interested in doing a fucking thing about it, it'd be completely out of self-interest because they want something out of
another
it.
problem is that, like, this is like arriving on Earth on October 7th. You can arrive on Earth and be like, oh my God, the Saddam Hussein character, terrible. Let's get rid of him. But you actually need to look at what's going on in the region and who's propping up who and where do the weapons come from. It's never been about, just topple the strongman because they're the bad guys in charge. Even if you pick the real bad guy, like, we're not talking about Saddam Hussein is not the same as toppling some of the democratically elected left leaders in South America and Africa that happened. But if you look at what gave rise to Saddam Hussein, it's American foreign policy. It's just whatever is useful at the time.
Yeah.
So a smart progressive who's like, just get rid of the strongman hasn't done their homework. The thing that's driving all these things is not justice or human rights or making sure that the most amount of people on Earth can have food and healthcare. Those are not the metrics that drive the decisions.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, it's always...
The measures your profit and American power.
There's a bunch of extremely wealthy people who are like Bilbo Baggins with the ring, like, oh, why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't I keep it? There's oil there. Why shouldn't I have it? And then you would never have heard of Samantha Power, except for that she creates a fig leaf that allows there to be a moral justification to interventions that they want to do anyway.
It was clear, even before a gulag opened at Guantanamo under the banner of enduring freedom, that the cartoonishly cruel and maladroit Soviet enemy had made for terrible intellectual complacency in the West. I do think he's missing some of the intellectual powerhouse that happened in the West.
Well, what he's right about is that, to a certain extent, the degree to which there is mass literacy still in the United States, which I think is increasingly in question. They talk about the ivory tower in the United States, and some of that, I think this article is making me think like some of that is quote unquote normal America's refusal to interface with or like be in conversation with intellectuals in any meaningful way.
Also, I mean, how much of the ivory tower of the United States is just corporate capture and beltway capture of American Western bullshit?
There is that, but there's also like a shit ton of like 60s and 70s radicals who retreated to the academy who are writing interesting stuff about this, and that's why people are really mad that like their kids coming out of college and hates America and like Western imperialism because they did learn about this stuff.
Well, sure.
And there's a lot of being written about it. I mean, all the best stuff that Chomsky's ever produced is criticisms of U.S. imperialism, and people read this stuff.
You have like Black liberation activist murders.
Yeah. So it seems to not permeate the consciousness of like the American body politic at all. Like they don't know about this stuff. They don't care about it.
Camus is permeated, the regular old Jacques on the corner.
Are you asking if Jean Paul and Simone and Camus were public intellectuals that people cared about what they had to say? I really can't.
I believe that they
I can't tell you if they were,
at the
but
time, but I'm saying, are they influencing the regular old Joe Schmoes now?
now, no. But I think that's the difference. Is
I don't know. This is probably empirically understood, and we just don't know. So we process up.
I mean, I'm not European enough to tell you whether most people cared about what Camus was saying.
Everyone's a little bit of a dialect, but you're not European at all.
I mean, a few generations removed, but okay. Well, anyway, very American over here.
The schools of 21st century Western imperialism possessed little of the historical literacy, let alone the moral sophistication of Arendt, Weber, and Camus. Dazzled by their self-image as humanity's philanthropic god, they were doomed to reprise the grotesque logic of slave camps under the flag of freedom. The leading periodicals of liberal cosmopolitanism, Newsweek, The Atlantic, did not hesitate to ponder the uses of torture in the early aughts. For his part, Ignatieff, then a human rights professor at Harvard, offered recipes for permissible duress in the pages of the New York Times magazine. Well, I don't think you're going to find the intellectuals in the pages of the New York Times.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find a time where someone of the moral sophistication of Ardennes, Weber, or Camus was in charge of European foreign policy.
Right.
But this is still a slam dunk, absolutely worthy of making. These people thought they were more serious and more understanding, more learned than anyone else. And they didn't even dazzled is the right word. They had no idea what they were doing. Yeah. They had no idea the tradition they were inheriting. They had no idea what America was, why it was intervening. They completely, absolutely self-deluded about all of those things.
Yeah, they were kind of like young bucks. They were like stupid bros who were like, we'll figure it out. We're great.
Yeah, I mean, they believed a bunch of lies.
They need to read any political philosophy. It's fine.
I mean, they read it, but they dismissed it all as like, finger waving and hand wringing.
The people who architected foreign policy in the 90s and
I think Samantha Power probably is pretty well read.
She probably was, but I bet you most of her white male colleagues
pretended they had read it. Maybe.
A tyrant from Queens rather than Baghdad or Kandahar has proved to be the nemesis of these militant humanitarians as he now exercises their will to power brazenly and at the expense of weaker, often darker people. Trump's sinister achievement is to delegitimize the old intellectual and political establishment, while at the same time cementing the racial hierarchies and regimes of repression that this elite exploited during their war on terror. In yet another parody of the responsibility to protect hucksters, the white supremacist president also wishes to be seen as the authentic savior of a benighted world at war. Western liberalism, constantly searching for monsters abroad, turns out to have been a moral mask for an intellectual service class, a fashion accessory tossed aside by Trump.
Yep. Bingo.
Yep. It is of no use to those presiding over a swift and brutal reversal of racial progress. It should not surprise us how quickly the 19th century prejudice that white men should dominate, quote, scare apart inferior African, Asians, and Latin American people has become common sense for much of Western politics and journalism. Quote, the subterranean stream of Western history has finally come to the surface, Arendt warned in 1950, after the 19th century ideologies of racial aggrandizement had achieved a monstrous culmination in the heart of Europe. The subterranean stream has again come to the surface in 2025, and it is sweeping away the once unassailable idea of the West.
Yep. I mean, I think all of this is true, but it's secondarily true to the more foundational economic crisis that has leads to all this stuff.
Primary versus secondary.
Yeah, like the Marxists think of the world as base and superstructure, right? Base is the economics. Yeah. The economics demand that we change the way that we approach solving problems because we're in crisis, and that crisis means that they have less ability to maneuver and get what they want. They have to be a lot more heavy-handed to maintain. They have serious challenges and enemies for the first time in decades.
Yep.
And then the superstructure are going to be the politics and the culture and the ideologies to support the needs of that base.
Sure.
And I think his analysis is very, very sophisticated and largely correct. That Western liberalism was a moral mask, that these people maybe believed it, but never acted in any moral way. They did whatever they needed to do. Yeah. They told themselves and told everyone else's story that they had the right to do it. I do think that what we'll find is that the Democrats will also have cast this aside, that they'll say that the challenges of the world are too serious to be stuck in like what they'll say something like it's woke or like it's idealistic or the world is a dangerous place, and if there's going to be a big bad guy in charge, it may as well be the United States and like this. But I think they'll also dispose of this stuff too.
You'll say that they're also disposed of the idea that there's
of Western liberalism as this moral mask. I think is also going to go away for them too.
And as a framework for interventionism. Are you saying that, or are you just saying that they're also? I mean, I think that all sides would be forced to throw off the mask, because I think the Western ideologies and assumptions and things that we all sort of nodded at are just absurd and unbelievable now. So they're not useful.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what that makes foreign policy or foreign intervention or war look like, because those were very useful scripts.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to look like fully mechanized total war at some point with it, which is to say millions of dead and every technological thing unleashed without much concern for like the value of human life. But in the meantime, it'll be we're intervening because it's good for the United States.
I think there's two things to keep an eye on. One would be how we intervene in Venezuela as a test case. And two, this other thing that came out this week is the military's all in on AI. And there's a lot of signaling. I think that the propaganda that's being released about that really is signaling like a comfort with dehumanized, mechanized warfare and the efficiency and necessity of it to protect America's way of life.
Yeah.
And I think those are very deliberate signals about what it will look like.
Yep.
And I think you saw, and honestly, if you want to look at what that looks like, you look at what happened in Gaza, because that was a AI enabled war.
Yep. The subtext that we agree has always been there, which is self-interest is motivating a lot of this stuff, and you know it and I know it, but we need to tell ourselves a story that makes us feel good. The story goes away, and it just becomes, we're doing this because it's good for America. And like, it'd be nice if there was better moral justification. There's just bad guys out there, and we need to deal with the bad guys so America can stay America.
It would be nice.
But Trump isn't, maybe, but
Schumer will.
I think that's what they'll go. They'll go, this all this did was drag America down. Worrying about all these things when no one else did dragged America down. We got to stop doing that.
All right.
Like, as if that's what dragged America down.
Hope you enjoyed this color seminar that we did not prepare. Didn't do the reading ahead. Done and dusted.
Done and dusted.
And you're at your peak. You mock the afflicted, wreak havoc on the weak. Your powers will fade as you grow old. 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 You're on the make and you don't do regret. You're always out for what you can get. You think like a snake and you ooze like a snail. Let the trail go cold as you swallow your tail. With your low rent skills and your heart of flint, telling your tales that are unfit to print. You're all weasel words, backed up by the boots, obsessed like the rest, with the promise of loot. Your pies will fade as you grow old. 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 You demand of the sea, it obey your commands. You grab at the land with both of your hands. But candles will burn, and time will reveal all that you've done and the money you steal. The suffering you're causing gives you no pause for thought. You've got your claws in the dead summer's heart. Birds will return, as the birds always do. When they come home to roost, they'll feast on you. Your pies will fade as you grow old. Your pies will fade as you grow old. Your pies will fade as you